Greetings, B-movie aficionados.
Hello, welcome to A Couple of Flicks. I'm Tristan.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Zach.
Today we are talking about a movie that doesn't appear to be well known still, despite the person who directed it. Would
And the
either of you like to?
writers.
Oh yeah, and the writers. Yes, especially the writers. Actually,
Yeah.
would either of you like to say the title of this movie?
Crimewave.
Yeah, all one word.
Yeah.
1985.
Yeah. So
Um,
why'd you choose this one?
I chose it mainly because of the director. Because it was a film of his that I hadn't seen, and it's a film of his that I've known about, like probably about as long as like I've known who he is, which I think the first movie of his I ever saw was The Quick and the Dead, the Sharon Stone cowboy movie. I don't know if you guys ever saw that one.
I haven't seen it. No, heard of it.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. You know, it's a cool little cowboy movie from the 90s. Like, you know, but it does have like, it does. I haven't seen it for a long time. I was like in the single digits when I saw it, and so I don't really remember much about it, but I do remember enjoying it. So but yeah, like I looked up his films after that and saw like Evil Dead and Crimewave, and the description for Crimewave in whatever book it was, like it said something weird, like a comedy about two serial killers or something like that, which I always found kind of a weird description, because it's like, how can a movie about serial killers be a comedy? And I don't know, it just seemed kind of vague, you know. And so I was always just kind of curious about it, but I also like knew that it was considered a really bad movie, but I never knew whether or not to choose it for this show because the director of it is like he's a well-known guy, and I don't know if like it really counts as like a bad movie or not. And I didn't know how bad or how good it was going to be necessarily as well, you know, because for all I knew, it could have been like actually not like so bad it's good, but just like bad or maybe kind of good. So that's kind of why I chose it, basically. And also like the fact that it was written by the Coen brothers, like it just kind of made me wonder like what it was ultimately. So
Okay, yeah. The first Sam Raimi film I probably saw was Spider-Man. I don't know if I saw the Evil Dead before I saw Spider-Man.
yeah, I
Can't
think
really remember when I saw Evil Dead.
I think the Spider-Man movies were like the films of his that kind of launched him more or less into like household name stardom, you know.
Back into popularity, yeah.
Yeah. So what about you, Zach?
I think I saw Army of Darkness first, and then of course the Evil Dead's after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had never heard of this one.
It's not very well known, and apparently it was pretty hard to find as well, just generally. Like it I guess it was released on VHS, but kind of obscure. Like I don't know, I feel maybe I saw the cover at like a video store, but I can't really remember. Like yeah, it seems, I don't know, but now it's been restored and gloriously re-released and available on places like Tubi and Amazon for free. So now everybody can see what a quality movie it is.
Good old Tubi.
Excellent. Yeah. I'm not sure if I watched it on Tubi or Amazon. I forgot. But I know I watched it on one of them. Anyway, I don't know. What were your? I don't know. Do you guys want to share any thoughts on it, or should I just dive into talking about the plot, or where to begin with this one?
It was weird. was definitely an
Yeah.
interesting, weird, bizarre film.
It was certainly more interesting than I expected.
Yeah.
Kind of incoherent, to
Mhm.
be honest.
Yeah. That
Yep.
was my first reaction. I was like, what's going on?
Yeah, like there were aspects of it that kind of reminded me of a Coen Brothers movie a little bit, like parts of the plot, like the crazy guy going around killing people. That whole idea, like that's something right out of a Coen Brothers movie, because that happens in like every other one of their movies. Is some guy or some person blows up and kills a bunch of people.
There were some good like little dialogue quips and stuff too that were Coen-esque.
Yeah, this movie was kind of an odd experience because there were scenes in it that I thought were kind of brilliant, but it was really hard to follow what was going on for the most part, you know. Because like I knew that there was some guy who was like who was on death row, this guy Ajax, which that's a pretty cool like type. Isn't that the name of a character for like the Warriors or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was on like death row or something, and it's like two guys who own, I think it was like some kind of laundromat service or something.
I don't know what business that was. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was selling it to some character who would later be referred to as the heel, but initially in the film he kind of seemed like he was going to be the villain. But it was yeah, do you guys want to just discuss that character?
Bruce Campbell. Yeah.
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 Ronaldo. What is his name?
Ronaldo the heel.
The heel, yeah. I wrote down because the main character calls him a heel once. And this was like, I don't know why I wrote it down, but it was like I don't like heels. And then he's like, well, maybe I don't like guys who don't like heels. I thought that was pretty Coen Brothers dialogue type tree.
Yeah. There were a couple moments that were like where certain shots, like some shots were kind of all over the place, but then some shots kind of remind me a little bit of like Barton Fink and stuff. Like I'd say like this is definitely not one of Sam Raimi's better movies, but I would say that this was probably like Sam Raimi's second most Coen Brothers film behind A Simple Plan, which I don't know if you guys have ever seen that one, but that movie is like, it's almost like a more serious Coen Brothers movie that it's so much like one of their movies that it barely even feels like a Sam Raimi film. And it's kind of unbelievable that he made a movie like that was like that high quality, because most of his other films don't have like any continuity or anything like that. But yeah, some certain shots and characters like that kind of remind me of it. So anyway, so this, what I don't remember, Scriggs or one of the bosses is going to sell this laundromat behind the other boss's back. Yeah, Trend. That's it. I knew it was like a one syllable name. To the Bruce Campbell, and yeah. And the main character is like some security. He like installs security cameras, and right at the beginning of the movie, you see him install a camera right in the hotel lobby. So that's like, I mean, it does end up that actually does end up coming into play later. So that's kind of cool. But I think that was the same lobby anyway. So
yeah.
At one point, it seemed like that whole
apartment. I mean, it felt like a hotel lobby, but I assume it was apartment.
Yeah, maybe it was an apartment.
Apartment complex.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I guess that makes more sense.
Yeah, they were living there and shit. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's like an apartment in a city. Which at one point there seemed to be some kind of hurricane going on.
Yeah. Just random shit. It was very what it reminded of. One movie it reminded me was Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Roger Rabbit, yeah.
Just because it was very cartoony and just chaotic.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Roger Rabbit without the cartoons.
Yep.
Yeah, I could definitely see a lot of that in there because there was a lot of very cartoonish stuff going on in this film.
A lot
The
of
set
cartoon
piece,
sound effects.
yeah, and cartoon voices. Like there was even that big heavy guy saying like, "Oh, you're playing hard to get" or whatever,
The guy from
which is
Pieces.
yeah. You guys
Oh.
noticed that?
No, I didn't. Which one?
I laughed.
The bigger guy,
Yeah, the bigger killer
fork
guy.
nose guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, he was the gardener or whatever in Pieces.
Yeah, maybe he got so tired of being accused of serial killing that he just decided to become one because he always wanted to try it.
Yeah. I didn't
But
notice that.
yeah, but yeah, like yeah, lots of very elaborate set pieces and physical. Did they use, I think I don't know how many stuntmen they used or if they even used stuntmen. Like a lot of the stunts in this movie looked like they were done by the actual actors, which kind of worries me a little bit. And
or dummies.
Or dummies.
yeah,
Dummies, yeah.
there was
A lot of
definitely
dummies in this movie.
yeah, and some of it seemed obvious in a way that seemed almost intentional to me, only like because like I've seen like a few like of those old Three Stooges sketches where they use an obvious dummy in certain shots and stuff, and the way that this movie used those dummies and this kind of remind me of that, which I think Sam Raimi has talked about being inspired by the Three Stooges before.
Yes,
and,
had Three Stooges vibes too. A lot of slapstick stuff.
yeah, exactly, and a lot of it's pretty comedic, you know, like I think Sam Raimi's really good at balancing horror with comedy, but this is really, despite the premise, this is actually kind of much more comedy than it is horror, I would say. You know, just because like a lot of the death scenes were just cartoonish death scenes of like people getting like fried to like pieces and you know stuff like that. Like that one guy gets thrown out a window and there's like yeah lots of dead bodies in this movie, but and also Drag Me to Hell, like that was also kind of horrific and comedic as well. But anyway, so yeah, so so then of course the other boss like figures this out that he's gonna be double crossed, and so he reluctantly decides to hire a couple of cleaners to basically do away with his conspirator. And meanwhile, you get Ajax, who has a lot of very awkward, uncomfortable moments with this woman who almost gets run over in the very first scene that she appears in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that bothered me a little bit. Just it was like, oh, okay, geez, yeah. Like that. Okay, so that didn't look like a stunt person.
No,
No.
I remember that. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah. So I could sort of understand a little bit why. Oh, so this movie was directed by Sam Raimi when he was in his early 20s. And I don't know, like, I'm sure there are exceptions, but the average person who was in their early 20s is not the smartest person in the world. And Sam Raimi's only other movie before this was Evil Dead. And, you know, that was something that took years to make with his friends. I think even one of the actors quit during the making of it. So like that alone was no small feat. So it's kind of ridiculous that a studio decided to give him a big budget to make a movie called Crimewave, co-written by the Coen brothers in his early 20s. Like, because apparently the making of this movie was pretty disastrous.
Yeah,
and yeah, and like watching it, you can actually kind of tell at certain points. There's just a weird vibe to it where just things don't quite feel right, you know? Like, I don't know, this movie just had a weird sinister edge to it that was kind of interesting, but also kind of like creepy.
Yeah. I didn't find it too much horror except for just the vibes that it was putting off.
Yeah, pretty much. So the cleaners that he hired end up basically going rogue, which it actually ends up being the person who calls them. It ends up being his fault that it
His
happens.
wife's fault.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, although he also, well, okay, we'll get to that, but let's see. Yeah, like the main character, I should probably, yeah. So the main character is flirting with this other lady, and like he's competing with the heel character, the Bruce Campbell character, and of course, like it's very spoof-like because they make it very blatant that she's just kind of weirded out by the main character, and like the guy who's supposed to be on death row.
Yeah.
And
he's reading a book, How to Talk to Girls.
Yeah. And I think he even says at one point, I wonder if he's read this book.
Yeah.
And there's also like an elaborate sort of dance number that happens, and there's some stuff that happens in a ballroom with some hijinks and Bruce Campbell basically being a douchebag that happens kind of in between some of the killings, which, I mean, I don't remember anything specific about it other than eventually she kind of gets sick of both of them, but she ends up putting up with Ajax. And then there's the moment where she gets left with a bill and she asks him to, like, if she could borrow money, and he's like, oh, I'd love to if I had the $36.
Yeah.
It's like one of those like cheesy old movies. So then you got the dumb gag where they have to wash dishes in the back room, which maybe that's
it was after the bit of because one of that elaborate dance scene was a dance competition for $36.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and they end up failing.
Yeah.
But it's funny though. And so yeah, they end up having to wash dishes, which I don't know if that's a real thing that people had to do or not, if they couldn't pay their tab. Like maybe they actually did that back then. Like that's something I've always wondered.
Yeah,
like ever since I saw that Pee-wee's Big Adventure movie, because that happens in that movie. And I always wondered after watching that if that was something that really happened, that people had to wash dishes in the kitchen. I'd love to make a customer wash my dishes.
I don't know if that's legal. I think you'd have to.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And of course they have to wash like a giant mountain of dishes and stuff, which would have taken them hours, but of course in the world of this movie it only takes them a few minutes.
And the reason why she was stuck with the bill was because the heel, it was like $76 bill, and he just threw down 40. And he's like, yeah, just tell him I had the appetizers, and walked away.
Yeah, pretty much. By the way, Zach, I don't know, what were you expecting from this movie?
Not this. Yeah. I usually watch trailers and stuff. I didn't watch anything for this. I just went off of the poster. It looks a lot more serious.
Yeah. It ended up being pretty zany, in kind of that forced type of way. But while all this is happening, the two cleaners show up at the establishment while the guy's still in his office, and of course the person who dialed the number, his wife is looking out the window like you guys mentioned, and is like spying on his boss, and yelling and screaming while she's doing it. So it's not really very good spying. And he's telling her to shut up and quit her hijinks. Yeah. Let's see, the skinnier dude has like this weird like electric type of prodding circular device that he uses to kill people, which he essentially incinerates this guy.
Yeah.
And
because they're like exterminators, and he switches it from like mice and then like goes like this knob turns to men.
Yeah, they're dressed as exterminators, which is kind of a silly cartoonish touch,
I mean, that's how he found them, because he found their numbers in their yellow pages, and then they just advertise, we kill, rats, cockroaches, men, other things.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right.
And yeah, they did have a lot of options in that little thing. Yeah. I think later on in the movie, at one point, they switch it to like
Heroes.
Hero. Yeah.
Hero, yep.
It's funny. Anyway, so that happens, and of course thankfully the dialer's wife doesn't see it, but then of course, he ends up getting impatient, goes on over there, and also his wife's nagging him to go check, so he does. He goes over, doesn't see any sign of his boss at first, and then eventually, like, his wife calls him right at the office, and he assures her he'll be back in the moment, and to have dinner ready for him and all this stuff. And so, at this point I'm watching it, I'm like, all right, so I guess he's gonna have to get killed now, because and sure enough, yeah, like, he finds the body, which confirms, ultimately what what happens, or at least I think he found the body. And then of course he ends up getting killed too, because the cleaners by this point are going rogue.
I thought that was an accident or something.
I mean, maybe it was an
I thought
accident.
he touched something on accident and got electrocuted.
Well, it seemed well, okay. I don't think it was an accident, because the scene afterward, the bigger guy was telling him, like, for all you know, that could have been the guy who called us.
Oh, that's right. He did say that. Yes, they accidentally killed the guy that was supposed to pay him.
Yeah.
I guess, technically.
Yeah, and then it ends up resulting in a situation like like what you'd get from another, like, Blood Simple or another Coen Brothers movie like that, where they go rogue, and they basically just start, like, she of course witnesses them there, and loudly proclaims herself in her sort of physical type of way. Like, I don't know, she doesn't exactly do a good job of, like, making her her suspicious behavior discreet. She just very clearly is gawking at them, so it's no surprise that they end up going after her next, and it leads to a mildly, I mean, if I were 8 years old, I'd probably find the scene terrifying, where he calls her on the phone and is like, woman found dead in her apartment or whatever. And let's see, so that results in, like, a big thing, like, is that the part where he, like, starts pulling the rug?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
He breaks in and
yeah, the bigger guy starts busting up her apartment, trying to get to her, and somewhere in the midst of that, right after he's like about to, like, strangle her, because there's one part where she tries to kind of get attention by knocking a plant off the windowsill, which was pretty suspenseful, but unfortunately, that doesn't work, because she times it wrong, and it ends up landing at the same time that he's getting into his car. He, like, slams the door at the same time that the plant lands, so he doesn't hear anything from her. But luckily, one of the neighbors ends up showing up, some dude whose face, he's got a bunch of shaving cream on. So there's a fight scene there. Actually, the fight scenes in this movie, even though they're comedic, I could see certain little aspects of Spider-Man and Darkman and things like that here and there, just in kind of the maniacal aspects of it, But
yeah, some of the camera work reminded me of Spider-Man and stuff.
Yeah,
definitely Raimi, I guess.
Yeah, it had a little bit of a cardboard type of feel, like a little cartoonish. And while this is happening, but around this point, Ajax and his girlfriend, what was her name? Nancy. So Ajax and Nancy go back to this apartment. Oh, and I don't even remember who were the actors that played them, because the only actor I remembered was Bruce Campbell.
Reed.
Does anybody have a list? Or
Victor Ajax is Reed Birney.
Okay. Because I know I've seen him in a bunch of stuff.
And the Nancy was Cherie J. Wilson.
Okay. So yeah. So they show up at their apartment, and she's had a bad night, because I think at some point on their way home, she ends up getting a bunch of crap splashed on her. At least that's what it looked like. It looked pretty brown, like diarrhea,
right?
Like somebody shit in the street, and then somebody drove in it and splashed her with it. Yeah, it was pretty foul looking. So he takes her back to the apartment, back to his apartment, and or maybe it's hers. Maybe
It
I
is
guess it
hers.
was hers. Yeah, because he was there to install the camera, and
But she lived like right across the hall from the
yeah,
dude.
yeah, and so they're in her apartment, and he goes out to get something, and one of the cleaners comes in, and that and in this moment it's like a bit where she kind of proclaims her love to him, and or not her love but just her appreciation for his kindness and her possibility of
Yeah, because she was
future
blowing him off
endeavors.
the whole time, being mean
Yeah,
to him the whole time.
yeah, and this is the part where she has a change of heart, but unfortunately he's not in the room, the killer is. And so
Yeah,
then
and there's that bit too where she was getting undressed, so he told him to close his eyes, but one of the cleaners comes in and he's like kind of between them and with his eyes closed, and there's a little funny bit there.
yeah, it was pretty funny. It was pretty creepy in concept, but it was played pretty like flamboyantly. And at some point he ends up pretty much he ends up doing some mimicry after he snatches her.
He does both. Like he
Yeah,
has some special power. I mean, they just ADR'd the original actor's voice over his, obviously, but
yeah,
because he had a comically squeaky voice, and then he would like go, and then like you just hear the original actors, like he would be
yeah,
talking to the girl as Victor. He had her like kidnapped in the bathroom and was talking to him through the doors in her voice too.
yeah, yeah. He did a bunch of different voices. He was like the Bobcat Goldthwait of the movie, basically. And so yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff that happens there where the guy Ajax comes back and starts talking to what he thinks is her, but he's actually talking to the killer. And meanwhile, the other killer is having some trouble. I mean, I think he first of all he has some trouble on the elevator with some random kid, and that kid ends up being a psychopath who accuses his dad of murder.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah.
The cop was like, "What kind of psycho would kill a man and then put shaving cream on his face?" And then the kid just goes, "My dad."
Yeah, and next thing you know, the cops are arresting his dad.
Yeah.
But there's a bit where the cops, where they're trying to hide from the cops, and then at some point, the older lady, the wife of the dialer, Louise Lasser character, is the actor who plays her, who I actually, she actually does quite a bit of his physical stuff in this movie that was pretty cool. But yeah, it's about around this part, like he's essentially kidnapping her. But she manages to get away somehow and get into a bag that goes to Uruguay.
Oh yeah, I forget how she got out, but she was like in the hallway. Oh, she hit him with a pan, I think, and then she was like jumping out of the hallway, all bound and gagged. And the main character like walks by her and says, "Hey, what are you doing? You should go." He like completely ignores that she's bound and gagged.
Yeah,
says, "You gotta go back to your room. There's some crazy people loose."
that whole part reminded me so much of Fargo, like where with the mom being bound and gagged in that movie and all the physical stuff that happens in that. It reminded me of that. But and did you guys see the after credit scene?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't.
Okay.
Shit.
Yeah. So in the after credit scene, and it's actually, I don't know how many movies in the 80s had after credit scenes, so that was kind of interesting. But she's in Uruguay and she's in a box and she's like saying hello, like
Yeah, just like on a random sand dune.
Yeah. It's kind of like, what the hell?
Okay.
Yeah, because I truthfully by that point in the movie I totally forgot all about our characters. So
Yeah, shipped her out.
Yeah, but for those who are still interested, anyway. So let's see. So then,
before that though, there was I love the cool bit of her but like how she got into the box. She went into the security office, like the security store or whatever, like where they were selling their equipment, and there was just lines of fake doors, and she was just running through the doors, closing the doors.
Yeah, the
It was
safest
like,
hallway in history or something like that.
yeah, there was like 20 framed up like doors, and she was like going through closing them all, and the dude was chasing her, just bashing through the doors.
Yeah, that was nuts. And then he had to run away from the doors before they collapsed on him.
They started falling like dominoes on him. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty wild. Yeah. And that looked like it was hard to shoot too.
I'd imagine.
Yeah, like I can't. It's hard to even picture storyboarding that, let alone shooting it. Ugh. Anyway, yeah. So, and then okay, this movie's only like 86 minutes or something like that, or 89 minutes. It feels like 2 hours.
It did feel like it was longer than.
Yeah, because eventually, like, there's like a car chase. I don't remember what exactly led to it, but I know there was like a pretty intense, really long car chase.
Like the last act was basically the car chase.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to figure out how we even get there, because like I know that they escaped the apartment at some point, but
I don't remember.
Yeah. Well, anyway, guess it doesn't
just
matter.
For whatever reason, the Nancy lady like runs out of her apartment.
Yeah, she gets away. Yeah.
And that's the car from Evil Dead, by the way.
Nice. Yeah.
Oh shit. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the movie, it was the car of like the guy they were initially supposed to kill, because there was just a corpse riding with her the whole time.
Yeah, pretty much. So there's a dead body in the passenger seat. You got the Nancy trying to evade the killers. You got you have Ajax, who's basically duking it out with them. At one point, he even climbs on top of their car, and he fights the skinnier dude on the roof. And you get a lot of moments where they have to like a lot of comedic moments where they have to duck under the bridge, like the bridge parts that are too short and stuff. Which it's kind of like the movie Speed, where Keanu Reeves and Dennis Hopper have to fight on top of the train, and Keanu Reeves has to say that stupid line, because like Dennis Hopper, he gets his head chopped off because he's like, "I'm smarter than you, Jack," and then Keanu Reeves is like, "Oh yeah, well I'm taller," because he lost his head. So now Keanu Reeves is taller than Dennis Hopper. But there's something kind of similar that happens in this movie, where so he ends up playing, because at some point Ajax gets the upper hand after he destroys the Zapper, this is around the time that he switches it to hero mode, and he is about to kill him, but the guy ends up crying and begging him for mercy and all this stuff, and trying to sort of play into his sympathies, which of course he falls for. And so then the killer, uses that as the opportunity to gain the upper hand. And then he does the stupid thing that the villains usually do in all of these movies. Although in this movie, they play it for laughs, where the villain talks and insults the hero, and tells him his entire plan, and goes on and on and on about that, for no reason at all. But of course, in this movie, it actually results in his death, because he ends up standing and not noticing the underpass below him, and so he ends up getting instantly smashed.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
The reverse, because like the bad guy tells him, "Oh no, look out! There's like when they're fighting, there's a bridge coming," and he turns around, look, there's no bridge, and it just is an opportunity for the bad guy to catch him off guard. And then the good guy, Victor or whatever, Ajax, he's like, "Oh no, look out, there's a bridge coming," and he doesn't look, and he's like, "Ha, I'm not falling for that." Gives the whole speech.
Silly him. So that happens. Oh, I thought you were gonna say something. And so that happens, and yeah, so and I remember his other car gets blown up. There's a bunch of explosions that happen, and
Yeah, there's like
Yeah.
one car that was like halfway in the highway.
Yeah, for some reason. Like
yeah,
like
yeah, that one was a
just
big one.
vertically in the highway for
God, yeah, and like when I look at those scenes, I think like, okay, that had to have been expensive, you know. But what's weird about this movie is that so much of it looks so cheap. Like it looks like a low budget movie. Like it looks like the funds were not really managed super well during the making of it, because it seems like a lot of the money was put more into like the stunt work and the pyrotechnics than the actual you know, the actual like editing and set design. So, but it's kind of an interesting combination too. Like it kind of reminds me a little bit of like Dick Tracy in a way. So,
yeah, I mean, I read they went over budget before they even got to the editing section. That's why, like, I guess one of the big problems was Sam Raimi wasn't allowed in the editing room when he
yeah,
usually is. That was one of their big fights.
yeah. Both Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell have disowned this movie. I think the Coen brothers have too, but I'm not
Yeah.
positive. I mean, none of them really want anything to do with this one. I guess that's why it hasn't really gotten a whole lot of attention until recently. But apparently, it actually does have quite a cult following. So, but anyway, so at the end, Ajax ends up rescuing the girl. It's a pretty crazy scene actually, because it involves the car actually hanging off of the end of a bridge. Like before that happens, the other car that the killers are in ends up like flipping and getting like blown up or whatever. And so the big guy like appears to have gotten blown up along with the car. But then he comes back, he only has a few burn marks, and he ends up pretty much being like the ultimate nuisance. And you know, lots of times where they try to kill him and he doesn't die, you know, but eventually they manage to knock him off the bridge into the water.
Yeah, they
And
fight with like it was an interesting little fight scene there too. The bad guy was using the rear bumper, and the good guy was using just a piece of the side railing of the bridge.
yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, it was pretty hokey, but in kind of a fun sort of comedic way again. So then it cuts back to him. It still doesn't exactly explain why he's on death row though, like because like it said like it doesn't say, it says that he like is on death row for murder, but it doesn't exactly say who he was like in like basically who he was sort of charged for, like whose murder specifically.
I think it was all the people that the two guys murdered, I'm assuming.
Okay.
Because he
Maybe.
fell into the water near the, I don't know if it meant like, but near where like everything happened, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, because at the beginning of the movie he says, "I'm not supposed to be here." Like that's like his big dramatic like you could like that's when you can tell that this movie has a low like cheapness to it, like yeah, because like it's pretty vague. Like the opening scenes and the ending scenes kind of feel just disconnected in some way, but I don't know, maybe that was intentional. But I just feel like there could have been a little bit more explanation. It just didn't have like but I don't know, the rest of the movie is pretty incoherent too, so I guess it doesn't matter.
Guessing that got messed up in the editing since the
Yeah,
studio took over the editing.
probably. Actually, I think I read somewhere that the opening scene and the ending scene might have been like reshot, now that I think about it, or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, doesn't matter. He's about to be electrocuted on death row in the chair. But meanwhile, his ex-girlfriend, or Nancy, who's a nun, and by the way, you guys caught the Frances McDormand cameo, I'm guessing. Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, saw that. That was good.
Yeah. They managed to get to the place just in time, And I think shortly before that, the governor actually beats them to it. And then you get this funny moment where the governor is like, "Oh, no, I'm here because I don't want to miss this. I don't want to miss this execution." So that was funny because you think the governor was going to stop him,
Give him a pardon,
from pulling the And so then the nuns show up. Nancy basically corroborates the story of Ajax, but Nancy needs somebody to corroborate her story. So, but unfortunately, the nuns have taken a vow of silence. However, they end up breaking their vow of silence, and he ends up getting rescued.
Yeah.
And
40-year vow of silence.
Yeah, you find that out in a very funny way, actually, that I'm not going to spoil. And then they get married, and the movie ends very happily.
Yeah.
And thus concludes Crimewave. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
No. Yeah, I think
All right.
that
Well,
covers it.
Yeah, it was an interesting movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. What were your thoughts on it, you guys? Because I'm sort of mixed. Ultimately, I'm mixed up.
Yeah, I wasn't in the right mood to watch something like this, so I didn't really like it. But I could probably like it a little more on a second watch.
Yeah, it's exasperating.
I'd have to say the same. Yeah, wasn't too big a fan of it this go around, at least, but I could see how it could have a cult following if with the right people, which I guess it does. But
yeah, I mean,
strange. Yeah,
it was very strange. I enjoyed it very much. I wouldn't call it good, really. I could see why, to a certain degree, he would not want to really like consider that, because it is kind of a messy movie. Just in general, it's just generally messy. Like there's just scenes that go on a little too long, and it doesn't, like, for a movie that's supposed to be really comedic, it's very slow paced, like very, very like mud paced movie. Which I think they were trying to build suspense, but it doesn't really work because everything is just so zany that you can't really feel a whole lot of anxiety from much of what's going on, because it's pretty much just two guys running around killing people. But it was an interesting movie to watch, and I think I liked it enough to watch it again. So I think I'd probably give it a 3, because I can admit that it's not good as a whole, but there are good things about it, is the way I feel.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way, but I would give it a 2.
Yeah.
all right. Yeah, I'd probably cut you guys in the middle and do 2.5.
Yeah. I could see aspects of this movie that the Coen brothers adopted as well. Like the Hudsucker Proxy, which is one of my favorite Coen brothers movies, that definitely has some aspects like to it, just in its visuals.
I mean, the name of the prison he was sent to was Hudsucker State Penitentiary.
Yeah, like this could have maybe taken place in the same world as that, actually. Like it had sort of a similar feel. So
yeah, I want to check that one out now after this.
It's really good. It's really, really good. I love that movie. Yeah. And yeah, I don't know. Do you guys have any other final thoughts on the Crimewave?
I just wanted to mention the box office numbers that's on the Wikipedia. So the budget was 2.5 million, and it only made $5,101.
Oof.
Yeah. Oh, because I was reading the Wikipedia too. Yikes. I heard it only released in like a theater in California somewhere, Alaska and Kansas.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Well, I guess with 5,000, oof. I mean, that's low, but considering that it was only in 3 places, I guess that's not bad. Yeah, because yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
because didn't they release it direct to HBO afterward?
I think that's what it
Yeah,
said.
that's why that's why they only had it in those couple of spots.
Okay.
Make it so it could go to HBO. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was also reading an interesting little thing was that that river they were filming, I guess, during the winter, and that river was frozen, and they blew dynamite up to make the water run.
Wow. Whoops.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Oh my god. Well, that was an interesting movie. So
Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
yeah,
Bizarre.
definitely. All right. Well, I guess peace out and sayonara. So
Yeah.
Till next time. Yeah. Have a good one.
See ya.
bye.